Good evening and welcome to Chasing Squirrels podcast. Really happy to have the guests that I have this evening. It feels like a bit of a really positive bookend to my podcasting experience, because when I first started out about a year ago, I'd love to be able to say right now, like somehow this is okay, this is the anniversary. There we go. It is. I'm going to declare it. It's the anniversary of Chasing Squirrels. So officially 1 year in. And back in the beginning, when I was looking to have conversations about education, I had a whole lot of individuals that were really kind in talking to me, because I got to be honest, when I first started off doing this thing, I had this 17-point list of questions that I thought to myself, these are the questions. These are the cutting edge things that are really important about education. And I pretty much found out within the first two podcasts that sticking to the list sometimes did not get the conversation, and it definitely crushed the flow. So the three guests that I have here this evening have all been a part of my process of trying to figure out what EDU is all about. And I would be a complete liar if I sort of said, I'm there and I get it, because I don't. There's so many little avenues and so many little corners that are still worthwhile to check out. And I'm hoping that reconnecting with these three guests tonight, they're going to throw some light on at least one of the areas that I'm really fascinated by, which is the whole training process for teachers to come into education. So this evening I have with me three guests, and I will let them introduce themselves. And I guess only because she said I could call her out, Sarah, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, hey everyone, my name is Sarah Ann Lalonde, and I am a teacher candidate in my second year studying at the French Faculty of Education at the University of Ottawa. My teachables are grades 4 through 10, and my teachable subject is English. I also have my own podcast, my own bilingual podcast called Que Sera Sera, and I am very involved with Voice Ed Radio.
That's a good one. Elif. Jump in.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Elif. I'm at the Faculty of Education at York University. I'm also, like Sarah, in my second year as a teacher candidate. I'm in the intermediate senior division, and my teachables are history and geography.
Fantastic. Diana, close us up.
I'm glad we went backwards. My name is Diana. I've recently been hired with Peel District School Board as an occasional teacher for secondary. And I've also started a master's program with the University of Ontario Institute of Technology in Education and Digital Technologies.
I feel like we're all grown up. Seriously, I got to say it, coming back and stuff's really different now, listening to the three of you. And I love it. I love the fact that I love it that you're still, it sounds like the joy's still there. It definitely sounds like a bit of the fatigue is there.
That's inevitable.
Exactly, right? And we talked a little about that on the pre-tape, that, you can come back from a holiday and it's like in the rearview mirror and where's my energy? Mm-hmm. So here's where I'd like to jump into, if we could. So if it's a bit of a reunion, I know we weren't all in the same room last time, but I have some common spaces maybe that we can land on. And I'm going to start with my easiest landing, relatively speaking, easiest landing spot. One of you, and I apologize, I don't remember whose feed this was on, posted something on Twitter, and the gist of the post had to do with learning during calm and learning during storm. Do any of you remember posting that? Retweeting it?
I think it was Diana. It was a TED Ed retweet.
Yes.
It said, there are some things you learn best in calm and some in storm, by Willia Cather.
It's a good quote. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a good leap off point. So I put it to the table. What does that look like from where you're sitting? Is there an experience that right away you're like, oh my gosh, I can see how that would be? Is it a sort of a skill set that you're thinking about, as in how do you manage learning in moments like that? Because I will tell you, for me, I haven't been teaching that long. I'm in my 13th year, and I can think back on all those moments where your toolkit, whether it's in a professional development or in real time working with students, it feels like the learning is never in that middle zone. It isn't always. You're kind of lower or you're higher, and you're bouncing back and forth. Anyone got something that kind of pops up with that theme in mind?
I can jump in on that one. Where this brought me when I read the quote was immediately thinking about classroom management and how you basically learn your classroom management mostly in storm, not when things are calm. And it's funny because I had a whole class one semester on classroom management, and I basically learned nothing until I went into my placement. And I had 25 grade fives that sometimes did not care what I was saying or wanted to listen to me. And it wasn't the theoretical, I would say, strategies that we would kind of talk about in my classroom management class that helped me in that moment. It was really kind of diving into, in the storm, basically what I thought could work best and testing out some of those strategies. So I can totally attest to that. And I think that there are certain things, especially in Teachers College, in the context that I'm in right now, where it's a lot better learning them in a classroom, in an actual classroom, rather than in a university classroom. And so that's what I had to throw down. That's what it made me kind of reflect on.
It's a good one. Elif, do you learn better in calm or storm?
I think it's both for me. I would say within my experiences, at least in the past year, the storm part is like planning everything up until I go up to teach. I feel like it's very complex, and there's so many things that I go through, even mentally, and trying to plan everything and get everything going. And not in a bad way, though, in a really good way. I find that it kind of pushes me and motivates me to do more and to have like better ideas, think of different things to do. I have to agree with Sarah, though. I think the classroom management part is a storm for me as well. I still struggle with that a lot. But then the calm part is actually seeing how everything goes by and how it's not that it's always going to be successful. Obviously, the lesson plans could have gone wrong, and but I feel like it's calming to even see that you made a mistake or you did something really good, and to move on from there to see what you're good at and what you need to improve on. So I'm kind of in that stream right now.
I hear an addiction kicking in. Because I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. So if I were to be given the choice to learn in one of those two modes, it would be in the storm.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I really get a clear sense of the trueness of my skills when they're tested that way. I think part of it also comes from, in a previous life, I was a chef. So one of the questions I'm asked sometimes is, do you miss it? And it's funny, I don't miss necessarily the grind of the restaurant, but what I miss time and time again, and I'll get this little bit of nostalgia every once in a while, Friday night, line up out the door. This is just the 7:00 seating. We know that there's 2 shows across the street, so we know we're going to flip the restaurant. You got your team. I have my team across from me in the kitchen. I'm calling out the orders. I'm checking the restaurant, and you hit flow. And I have a real hard time hitting flow, that flow state for myself, when I don't have, I almost hate to say it, an antagonistic environment that challenges me. And part of, I don't know if I know I may have mentioned once or twice, like my teaching contest text is, I've always been in niche and small spaces. So in guidance and spec ed, and then alternative education. And now I work with students that have been expelled or suspended from their home schools. So the antagonism continues. But I find in that space, I'm constantly tweaking, adjusting those tools. Diana?
Yes.
Are you a calm learner or a stormy learner?
I think I'm a stormy learner. Based on what you said with the restaurant environment, I totally get what you're saying, because I work as a waitress on the weekends. And when it's so busy and you're talking about the lineup and it's so busy, and you find that flow with like the people you're working with, the people who are cooking, your other waitresses, it's like, in a way, it's like kind of exciting. And then you're so tired at the end of the shift, but it's like exciting. Like you're so stressed at first, but then you kind of find your flow and everything's moving quickly and it's going well. So I can connect to that very well when I compare it to, I feel like the most I've learned in a classroom when I was teaching subjects that I had difficulty with, which I needed to teach myself as well, whether it be math or a more complicating Shakespeare lesson. That's where I learned the most about myself as a teacher and my students and the classroom overall, because it was where I was also uncomfortable. So I feel like that would be the storm for me. But then you figure it out as you go on, like the next day or the day after that, and then it falls into place.
Mm-hmm.
What are you observing in your new workplace as far as how calm and storm are managed by the general, let's say, the general culture of the school? Would you say that there's a lot of there's a very large focus right now in many school boards around managing mental health for students, and that also includes all learners within the school, so staff and teachers, support workers, anyone that would be coming into the school. And there could be an argument made that, well, if you're constantly flexing back and forth between calm and stormy, it might not be necessarily a reliable learning environment. So I'm curious, in the new school that you're in, Diana, what are you observing? Are you observing that and again, like we sort of said, calm and stormy they're not positive, negative. They can just be states of mind to learn in. What are you observing about the school? Is it a calm learning environment? Is it stormy, activated, sort of energized? What are you seeing?
Well, right now I've only started last week.
Okay.
So I've had a few schools that I've been to. It's a little difficult to get a sense when you're only like a supply teacher.
True.
Because you're kind of left with just like group work. But what I've noticed about the schools overall is I don't know if I had this in my high school, maybe Elif can chime in if she knows, or if maybe our old high school has it now because she's there doing placement. But there's, at least with Peel District School Board, most of the schools have like a contact room. And what I've learned about this room so far is usually the teachers will bring students in if they're skipping class, whatever, and they'll hang out in that room, get life skills lessons, do homework. But I've also noticed that when students aren't feeling comfortable in the class, they can choose to go to that room to do their homework there instead. And I found that to be very interesting because sometimes students may have anxiety or feel uncomfortable or feel like they just need a space where it's not as busy or crowded. And they're allowed to go to that room to do their work, get extra help. So I found that really interesting that I didn't think was an option when I was in high school.
I love that. What do Sarah and yeah, well, there we go. As I'm looking down at my page taking notes, and I can see, Sarah, you're in. What have you noticed?
Yeah, so I'm currently working as a tutor in the classroom right now in an elementary school, supporting in math, and which means that I'm in a few grade 3 and grade 6 classrooms. And when you talk about learning environments, the calm and the storm, I immediately think about some of the teachers that I'm seeing when I go into different classrooms. And I think that the teacher and the way that they approach their teaching in general, the way their personality and persona kind of thing, has a huge effect on their classroom, because there's a certain classroom that I love going into because the teacher is so calm. And the first time that I was in this classroom, I had never seen a classroom that was so zen. And the students, it was never over too loud, or there was always nice music playing. And, they had what is the really smelly things? The diffusers with like scents.
Like they're running incense as well.
Yeah. And it was a calm learning space. And then I go into a different classroom and the teacher you can just sense like a huge ball of stress and a lot of yelling and a lot of just complete polar opposite of the other classroom that I was mentioning. So I think that as a teacher, sometimes they might not necessarily notice it, but they have a huge effect on that calm or storm learning environment.
That's pretty
remarkable. And it affects the students a lot because you can tell. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's a few schools that are going through transformations, and including I guess I call it slow learning in a lot of ways. So I mean that could be anything from meditation to yoga or other sort of slow arts, as well as self-regulation training, as well as we roll that into self-awareness and a lot of the mental health tools and mental wellness tools that are trickling into the school. That's the room, that having that space for students to go to, I think it's critical. One of the things that I often wonder about, I look for a similar space for teachers. Have any of you noticed anything like that in the schools where, yes, you might have these oases within the classrooms, but then you sort of get into the general population, the flow in the hallways, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm jumping on a rush hour subway just to make it to my next oases. Have any of you noticed spaces within the school that are, let's say, more general population to include everybody to have that kind of calmness?
I haven't.
No hands up.
I haven't either.
No.
It's an interesting thing, eh? I would almost argue there's definitely some space there to have and I think sometimes one of the things that I've noticed there's a little bit of a dated example, but one of the ways that staff tend to get that same calmness is like, okay, just make sure that staff room door is closed. Right. And I think at least one of us had that conversation about being in the staff room, I think the last time we spoke, and, making sure that finding the right people to sort of listen to. That's cool. Calm in a storm. That's my first one. Anyone else want to throw down on that one, or can I push another one your way?
I could add something to that, actually. That comes to my mind. When we were talking about like if there's a space for teachers last semester, I guess I didn't really find that space within the school, so I kind of created it for myself, and I used to go out for lunch because I found that to be a nice way to like kind of break out the day and have that calmness and to actually like rejuvenate myself and get some fresh air. Because I didn't feel like I could do that within the school at the time. So I feel like sometimes you kind of have to search with it within yourself and try to find that if you need it, you can go out and you can, get a quick fresh air and then come back in. Because I do feel like it's really important, especially for teachers, to be mentally capable of going back and actually not feeling overstressed, because then it can come to a situation like Sarah was saying, in that classroom where the teacher was like really stressed and yelling, and that's not a good classroom environment to be a part of.
Totally agree. I remember in one of my very first placement, when I was a teaching candidate, I got the tour of the school, and the individual did an amazing tour. Like it was easily 45 minutes long. Like wow. Yeah, I know exactly. Right. This teacher came and spent time with me, and they walked me through. We're walking into classrooms, and right near the tail end of the tour, the teacher brought me through the main office, and this is administrator, and this is secretary staff, and then it was right at the back of the office the staff room was, and we walked through there, and there were two doors. So we walked in one door, and we kind of circled through. And it was there's a staff room, sometimes there's snacks. And then as we're walking out the door, the teacher leans into me and says, "No one ever goes to the staff room." But it was like a stage whisper. It was too loud. And I will tell you, there were 5 people in the staff room. So I'm walking out there like, was that like a insult? Was there a jab there?
What?
Yeah, there was people sitting in the staff room. I had this image because I didn't look back. Like, right, like the person said, I'm like, I'm out of here. Like, I don't even want to pretend like I'm having this convo. But I imagine one of the people sitting at the table in there, like mid sandwich bite, just like staring us down. No one ever goes in there. Yeah, it was kind of over the top. I will never forget that. That's one of those startup memories. I'm kind of locked in. Mm-hmm. So here, let's go to this one. I think the irony sometimes of getting used to our work and our job is that it can kind of unknowingly become complex, and we might not even be aware of it. I mean, this can be the type of routines we set for ourselves. It can be the way we sort of organize and plan our days. It can be, because you have a certain number of deliverables that you always have to do. You might say, okay, I know I have to be sort of writing by this time. I have to go to this meeting there. I'm curious if we lift that up a little bit, just a little bit, to kind of look underneath it. I'm curious as to whether or not has been any moment in kind of the routine of becoming a teacher where you're kind of, I'm going to say stunned, maybe not stunned, maybe amazed by how complex something has become. And it could be something as in it was an idea that was introduced at faculty, or a project that you became involved with when you were at one of your schools, or even working on one of the relationships. Was there something that kind of pops up where you were like, my gosh, this is so much more? And I'm not framing it positive or negative. It just suddenly you had this realization, like a paradigm shift. This is really complex. What do you think, Sarah?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll give a little bit of context. So I just recently got my name on the supply list for the school board in Cornwall that I want to work for eventually. And it was really the first big step to actually getting a teaching job once I'm done my degree. And so I've been thinking a lot about that moment, whether I get a long-term contract or actually get a position in September. And I've just been thinking about the big picture of teaching more or less. And that whole complexity, like you were saying, and all of the little things that goes into teaching, whether it be the fact that you have probably 20 plus students, other children, other parents, kids in your classroom that you have the responsibility of, the classroom management, the fact that you have to teach them content and teach them values, and you have to assess them and make sure that they're learning, and everybody learns a different way. So you have to, learn about them and create relationships and teach them in their specific ways. So we got to differentiate, and we have to, assess the learning, do report cards, and at the same time do tons of, professional development and be connected with the other staff in the school. And there's so many things, and it's been really overwhelming when I've been trying to say, like, can I actually do this? And I've never felt like I couldn't, but the closer I get to those responsibilities, the more I've been really reflecting and questioning myself on that.
Holy crud, that was good. You almost gave me a panic attack. I was like, I'm starting to write a couple of things down. I'm like, I don't want to write that anymore. Stop reminding me of it.
And those are all the things like that have just been going around in my mind. Like, how am I going to do it? Like, have I been trained properly enough? Like, there's so many things that I've been asking myself.
Yeah, Sarah, you said it so well.
Mm-hmm.
You said it so well. I'm here thinking like exact same thing. I feel like we're like pretty like we're on the same stage within our career, because we kind of started at the same time, and now we're almost done. And with like school and like everything that you have to apply for, and like resumes and cover letters and making connections, like I've been hearing like you have to get like references, and you have to have other people come watch you, like principals or vice principals. Like these are the things that are always on my mind. And yeah, it's difficult. I feel like it's really complex, and going into it, and from an outsider perspective, I don't think a lot of people actually know how complex it is. And
I've been like, why do people even go into teaching? Like, is it worth it?
I think it's definitely worth it. I feel like right now, we're kind of in between, like we're doing two things at once. We're in school still trying to finish our, our program, and then we're in our practicums at the same time, and we're trying to apply and trying to make those connections. So I think there's a lot going on. But yeah, I'm in the same position. I'm kind of in that complex circle as well.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Diana, save us. Tell us that everything is just easy peasy. You're like, you folks are just triggering yourselves. I got this.
I'm still scared. Like, I just started supply teaching, and like at our sign-on appointment, they were telling us about like evaluations that they're going to do after 15 days and then after 40 days. And I'm thinking, like, what are they going to evaluate me on for being a supply teacher? And it's like, it's so nerve-wracking. And then you had the option of saying, like, checking off if you are open to doing an LTO assignment. during your occasional teaching, the 10 months that you have to do before you can actually apply to an LTO list. And I'm like, well, what if they do ask me to do that? Where am I going to be left off? Like, what if I don't know where they are in the unit? What do I just start lesson planning? Like, are they going to give me a warning a few days in advance? Is the teacher going to leave me any lessons? Like, I'm so nervous every day, even just walking into the classroom. I'm like, what kind of students am I going to have today? Because it's not like I'm going into the same class and I can build a relationship with them, right? I have a new set of students every period, and I don't know how these students are going to be. And it's just, I'm nervous every day.
You're hardcore. You are. Like I was saying right now, you're like the Navy SEAL of the teaching world. Drop in, drop out, take care of business. You know, zero dark, whatever that movie was. You're like going in just to take care of something and get in, get out. It's, you know what I'll say from where I walk the halls, I make sure, I will say I'm intentional in making contact with as many people as possible. If I'm going to be in the hall, I really don't care how fast the traffic's moving. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not the guy that's going to stop in the middle and do my texting and sort of do phone calling, but I am the guy that will shake hands and say hello to people and notice and say, hey, you know what? I'll be the one that makes the mistake of saying, hey, are you new to this school? And they're like, no, I've been here for like 4 weeks. I'm like, oh, sorry, I guess I just haven't walked down this hallway. But I think even in doing that, like even 4 weeks there, and if we're mid-semester, they're still fairly new. You know what I mean? Like, you're still sort of noticing. And I think that noticing is powerful. What's the, do you get the sense, like, Diana, do you get the sense that anyone has noticed your state of mind? Let's say apart from your family, who you may just, you know, you come home every day, you're like, whew, and then you sort of, you know, exhale. Do you get the sense that there's anyone there that can notice and kind of help you out?
I try to keep it cool in the school.
I know it. That's my t-shirt. That's my t-shirt.
I try to not make it look like I'm freaking out at the beginning of every class before the students start trickling in, or freaking out while I'm doing attendance and stuff, or freaking out when a kid goes to the washroom and it takes like 10-15 minutes to come back, and I'm like, oh my God, where are they?
Been there. Yeah.
Do I call down to the office yet? What do I do? I try to keep a brave face, but I don't think I've only started like last week. I haven't really, some teachers will say hi, but I haven't really made any friendships yet or any connections or anything like that.
I love hearing that example, because even, you know, those are the questions that I ask myself, even getting new students anytime, sort of checking my responses. And you can use that, like that one that you just mentioned, like, I think the kid's been gone for a long time. There's a really fascinating moment there where you're about to cement a frame of mind that you will use again and again and again. And it's hard not to commit to a line of thinking. Okay, 10 minutes out of class, that's officially too long. Okay, who do I call? Who do I call? And you're not really you might be making these faces in front of the class too. I don't know. But right now, like I'm doing like this sort of like, I'm kind of, my eye is slightly closed. I'm kind of Sherlock Holmesing, kind of 10 minutes is long. Yes. Where might they be? Maybe they did another round of it. And then, you know, someone's got their hand up. Miss, how do I do this quadratic? Wait, I'm trying to figure this one out. And then it's an interesting place though, because I've met the 22-year teachers that are asking themselves the exact same question. It's you enter into this kind of zone of teaching philosophy that I think anchors itself in ambiguity. And there's a whole lot of those kind of moments that kind of falls into the welcome to teaching, you know, and I mean, the other side too, I mean, the ease that you deal with it sometimes comes down to relationships and confidence. There's other things that you learn, but I even find seasoned teachers, they ask themselves the exact same question.
Things they don't tell you in teachers college.
No way. I was like, yeah, learn about that.
Yeah.
It's all about that whole learning in the storm thing, right? I think we can go right back to that.
And you know what? That's a light drizzle. That moment, you know what I mean? Like, because there's other things that, let's say light drizzle from where, let's say I sit, for other, like I said, 20-year teachers in, that is storm. And you can sometimes really get fascinated by, you know, you find yourself in conversations with individuals who are definitely all stormed up about something. Like, this is a really hard, difficult, challenging thing for them to kind of process through. And you're sitting there, you're like, yo, it's so simple. All you got to do, and this is internal, you're not actually saying this out loud, because, if you've ever seen someone doing stormy learning, don't get in their way. But if you're thinking like, that's so simple, like I know the answer to that one. And then conversely, what you might find to be a bit of a stormy moment, my hope is that someone else would help you be able to help you navigate that one. It's that's a good one. So, okay, I like that. That's the complexity. Cool. I know I'm really fascinated. In a lot of ways, I'm stunned. I'm stunned only because of there's growth that I can notice in the conversation with all three of you. The experiences that you now have under your belt, it makes it like, well, just reinforces the fact I'm happy to talk with you again. But it's also interesting to hear the change in focus slightly. Like there's more focus now from the three of you about the work experience. Like it's specific. You're speaking specific. I mean, you kind of had that plug too, like the things they don't teach you at faculty. But that's the only thing that's been mentioned about faculty so far. I think when we spoke previously, it was more about the faculty experience. I mean, you had practicums under your belt, but it was sort of managing. So you have all shifted, which is really cool to hear. Mm-hmm. And the language that you use is teacher language. It's not candidate. It's not, no, I say that quite specifically. This is teacher language. It's not candidate language. And the things that you're being challenged by right now, it's the stuff of the storm. It's the stuff in the school. So I commend you for having that mindset. You've shifted. You've definitely shifted. Yeah, you're Thanks. Very welcome. In that, what do you feel yourself becoming as a teacher? So, none of us can exist. I'm including myself with you youngins. I can't exist in my candidacy anymore. You sort of get closer to becoming the teacher. And of course, you're going to have some curriculum you're responsible for. But what do you find yourself becoming in addition to a teacher? And this could be something as, well, I really want to coach basketball. It can be something as complex as I'm really digging my teeth into supporting equity issues. Like almost to the point I could walk away from my teaching altogether if I could just work on equity issues. So you can kind of have those two bookends. Do any of you three find yourself kind of concurrently becoming something in addition to, let's say, a content specialist teacher? Diane, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to start with you this time.
Oh, no.
I like that. That's strong. I'm not going to edit that out.
I've actually been pretty interested so far. And like when I was helping out in the contact room, they were giving some life skills lessons about like, how do you start a bank account? How do you apply for a credit card and all this stuff? And even working with students in some of the vocational or workplace classes, it's like, I feel like when I was in high school, everyone thought that you had to go to university to be successful, right? And they didn't really give many options, or they didn't really explain them and saying like, hey, there are so many other things you can do. And now that I've gone through university and I've seen that most of my friends that have gone to university have ended up having to specialize in college or go back and start over, for example, or some of them have just scrapped university and started fresh. I feel like I'd like to be that voice for students who may not want to go to university and may want to take a different route, and that they need to know that there are options for them. And it's not just university. It's not just college. You can open up your own restaurant or, start a business. I was listening to some students talking in class today. It was an IB class for business management. And one girl was talking to her friends and she's like, university's a scam. And then her friends were like, why are you saying that? Didn't you apply? She's like, yeah, my parents would kill me if I didn't go. But, I'm trying to develop an app right now. I'd rather start my own business. And I'm like, that's so cool. More students need to know that there's other routes you can take. And I find I'd like to help with that. Does that make any sense?
No, it totally makes sense. It's a funny thing I find myself in some of my classes that some of the best lessons are hung around talking about lived experience. And one of the challenges, I think, with bringing curriculum to life when there isn't a lived experience, you really feel the gravity of those lessons. And if any of you, well, Diana, you might be feeling this as well, but going into classes where you don't have a footing in the content area, or if you're being given a new course to teach and you're learning it along with the students, that's one of those areas where you may you have an idea about the, solving for X or certain historical dates, but you feel the gravity of not having a lived experience to to grease the wheels for that conversation. I think the challenge in that then can be jumping into a new context is talking about life and bringing in some of the life skills things. Mm-hmm. So I'm totally on point with that one. What about you for Elif? What about you? What are you becoming?
I feel like I'm still trying to discover what I've becoming or what I want to become, but I've been really interested in student-centered learning for the past in my last practicum placement that I had. I've been really trying to focus on how to engage, disengage students, because I find that it's really hard to tell sometimes when students are really engaged. Like, yeah, they could be looking at you or they could be just staring at you, but you don't really know if they're really listening to you or if they're actively participating, if you have like a group discussion or something like that. So I feel like I'm really trying to get a handle of how I can, be conscious of my own lessons and my own plans and what I want my students to learn throughout teaching them. So I've been trying to make things more hands-on, more relatable, kind of like what Diana was saying, was trying to have it more directed to their actual lives through the activities that we're doing or through the teaching that I'm doing. And I feel like that actually helps build better and stronger relationships as well between students, because at the end of my practicum, I had a lot of students come up to me and actually tell me, thank you for doing it this way because I actually understood it, or they felt more confident in their work because they were able to understand the content more better, because it wasn't more strictly based on like writing, or if it wasn't just strictly based on like reading through a textbook. So I'm trying to really develop different ways and engaging ways to help students understand that it's not just about reading and writing all the time, but there's different ways of learning things. And everyone, of course, has a different learning style to, we can serve to.
I love often, I totally agree. And it's funny, I've been in more than enough conversations where Diana touched on this, where everybody in the room is so forward looking to post-secondary, college and university, that you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. I started to feel uncomfortable because despite the fact that there's overwhelming belief that has to be the next step when you finish high school, I know from the inside that there are individuals in that class, again, because of the relationships and making connections, that are just freaking out that that's the expectation of them. And it's not even necessarily that they want to necessarily go into business for themselves or design an app or go independent, but they are conscious enough that they know they don't want to do more school right away. And that can be a really challenging conversation. I often think about some of that pressure to sort of almost look at it a little bit like product development. Like, it's still a very strong philosophy that what we do in high school feeds university and colleges. And I've always been more comfortable, but I'm finding more and more spaces to have this comfortable conversation. Is like, what we develop at high school can be looked at more like an incubator. It doesn't have to lead directly. There is no sort of expressway right to college or university. And if we can figure out some of those programming left and right steps, I think what Diana was mentioning too, is that if we can figure out some of those spaces where we don't have to talk about what we're doing right now in the future tense, we can actually just stay in high school and do really cool things. Not forever, but we can but you get what I'm saying. we can stay in there and we could stay in there and create something that post-secondary wants from us more than the marks. So that person developing an app gets to go to university. They're not going to take courses. They go there as a consultant. And there's a really interesting space there. And I like that conversation. I like that conversation a lot. Sarah, what you got?
Well, mine is a little left field from what we're talking about right now, but I'm going to roll with it anyways. Because I guess it's very individual and personal and different from other teacher candidates. But my space that I'm in right now and my thing that I've kind of evolved in the past couple years is really becoming almost like an ed tech kind of teacher and finding all of those ed tech tools. Like I've been to a lot of conferences and I'm constantly on Twitter learning about new things. And I think that integrating these into the classroom as a teacher is really thinking out of the box and out of the box of this traditional classrooms that we still see and that I'm still seeing in some schools. So I really want to be that teacher because I think that, technology can be an essential part of learning. It's not always about the tool, but it's important to know how we can integrate the tools into the classroom and know their pedagogical values and know how to facilitate learning activities with those tools. And so I look forward to when I am a teacher to mentor other teachers on how they can use some of these tools and mentor my students on how to use them as well, and then have them use the tools to show their learning, which I think is really cool. So that's kind of where I am right now. I also think that maybe someday I'll become like a tech coach. I think of Jen Apgar and I look at her role right now and it's really incredible. And I hopefully look forward into growing into that kind of mentor someday.
That's cool. Do you know those, one of the things that I found in some of my conversations is that those roles look really different school board to school board. Do you know in the boards closest to you, do they have such a...
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So my stepmom is actually in the French school board that I'm going to work for. It's called in conseillère pédagogique en technopédagogie. So I got my eyes on that role in a few years. I definitely want to be in the classroom for a bit, but that's a future goal.
It's very cool. I had this concept. I still have the concept. I'm wrestling with it, and I put it to said. So, do you folks have you heard of Debbie Donsky? Does that name kind of Debbie Donsky? She and I are friends. We connected online. I mean, she was so great. She was on my podcast as well, and I've had some really great. She's given me a lot of great advice. And when I asked her one time. I said, "Have you ever heard of someone pitching a school board for a job?" And it just strikes me that we're coming into a space in education where, and that was part of my reason asking, does that position exist? I've spoken to other people on the podcast and there isn't like a digital learning resource teacher. Like there isn't a person that's kind of dedicated to a space in the board that you go to. It's kind of local, or there's one person, or there's that guy or that gal that I can email and they'll come and teach me about G Suite or something. So
yeah, I think it depends on like the school board and what their philosophy is, right? If they're stepping into that different mindset, because there are some schools that get support from outside kind of companies, like you were saying, but the school board, luckily the one that I would like to go into, they really have that new vision, and it's exciting.
Cool. I put that idea to all three of you though, because I think that the space that the three of you are coming into teaching, you will be here longer than me. And part of it's just because I'm old, right? Like I came to teaching late. My life would be very, very different. If had I been in education longer, and had more time to sort of get to all of the stuff that I'm interested in, but I'm really excited for new teachers to come into teaching, bringing in what their version of personalized learning is and modern learning and using ed tech, but also entrepreneurship. You look to some of the feeds coming from the States, and the concept of entrepreneurship in the States as a teacher, I think in a lot of ways is by necessity. Like there's quite a few teachers that the reason that they have a side hustle is because contractually it's not as robust as what we have up here in Canada. And that could be the reality for some of the teachers down there. But there's others that have, they've taken their entrepreneur spirit and they're covering a classroom during the day and they've got their side hustle at night. And I'm curious to see what that eventually looks like up here, because I don't know if it's really taken hold yet. My version of it, like I said, is going to the school board when you have your contract and saying, okay, I've been teaching, this alt ed thing for about 5 or 6 years. What do you think about this as a job in the school board? And you frame it out according to all the logical and expectations and, growing success. We don't have a Dragon's Den or a Shark Tank to do that as educators. Not yet. But I wonder. I give that idea to you folks. I dare you. Pitch your own job. Totally. I love the laughing, eh? You folks laugh, but I'm giving this stuff away for free. I won't have time to get to it. I just won't. The one of the things that I remember even coming in as a teacher candidate, beyond the steep learning curve and the reality of, oh my gosh, this is going to be me. I'm not sure if I want to take the reins. I started to notice things about education that either someone mentioned it to me or it was just reinforced through observation. And I'm calling it kind of baked in. It's sort of like that stuff that's just, it's really hard to move. Like it's really hard to kind of shift the thinking. It's only after about 10 years. Well, like I said, I've been in here 13 years that I'm starting to see the conversation open up around assessment and going gradeless. That when I started in as a teacher candidate, that would have been something that was absolutely baked in. No one really talked about going gradeless and what that would look like. Your feedback loop and the triangulation of artifacts and all that kind of like that. Just it wasn't really a thing. What are you folks observing anything that's at this point right now that you're like, yeah, that it seems like it's kind of baked in, not impossible to get some sort of momentum for change in it, but it just seems like it's a thing that everyone's just not really doing much about.
I think I can take a stab at this.
Do it.
I recently, I guess, at the faculty, we've been talking a lot about de-streaming, because I know some of the boards have been, I guess this is more for the high school level, because there's the different levels. There's like the academic, applied, and then some high schools have like IB programs. And growing up, like even within my own experiences, students would determine kind of like what Diana was saying. So if you took academic or university courses, you would go into university, and if you took other ones, then you would go into college, that kind of stuff. So I feel like that's really like what you were saying, Clive, like baked into like education. There isn't much talk about doing it on doing de-streaming on a larger level. It's more so I guess a couple schools are taking initiative into doing so, but I feel like that whole concept of putting students into levels of achievement, so applied or academic or whatever the other ones are, it really, I think sometimes it downgrades some of their potential, because it already sets them up into this mindset that if I'm in an applied class, then the teacher's not going to expect a lot from me. So that's the expectation going in. And then for those who are in the academic or the higher level, they are automatically assuming that, oh yeah, I could get to go to university because I'm going to take all these courses in the higher level education, and that's where I'll be. So that's kind of like, and there's a lot of equity and I guess problems that come up with that as well. But I feel like that's something that's very baked into education, and I don't know if it'll be gone, but it's just something that I've been thinking about.
I think that's great. I'll connect it right to the next piece that I was going to do. What's the conversation that you would like to see come out of that, and or what part do you think you could play in that?
Well, I'd like to see more teachers maybe a part of it, like supporting it, and maybe more advice given and more workshop, more information about how it would go about. And I know there are a couple schools that are doing it, so maybe having them come and support other teachers in going about that kind of work within the schools. Like, it's obviously not something that will happen overnight, but I think it is possible, and I think it will definitely help a lot of students out, and I think it will have them become a little bit more confident in their work and actually pursue different things, and not just go into university, but do other things. Yeah.
That's a good one. Diana, what are you thinking?
I guess that kind of connects to what we do learn in some of our education courses about UDL, and how your classroom you need to be able to reach every student. And so then this whole idea with de-streaming, I agree, it reduces confidence a lot. And for some students, it's like your parents sometimes are like, you know what, you're going to go to all these academic classes and you don't have any choice. And sometimes, they're overwhelmed. They're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What if I can't do it? What if I won't be able to handle it? And I guess it's like that whole idea how we need to be able to bring in UDL and differentiated instruction and make sure that our students are all connecting to the material and we're reaching out to them.
The parents are major power players in education, and often one of the opportunities that I've observed that we've missed is looking as parents as colleagues, lesson planners, and consultants. Now that takes a little bit of. I was just having a conversation today with a parent, and we were completely on the same side of the table in our conversation. But I put to them, I said, in sort of working with the education system, I believe as a parent, there are times where it's good to be the parent. So you show your passion and your love of your own child and your sort of connectivity to the family and the experience of school and the value of that. But I said the idea of being an effective educational advocate sometimes is a separate set of tools. And, this was me helping a parent be a better connector with education. But I always wonder on the broader sense. I can remember sitting in a staff training. So, when I was in a larger school, sitting in a staff meeting, and we were talking about effective lesson design, a 3-part lesson design. UDL was included, equity was included. There was a whole bunch of elements in there. And I put to the group, I said, maybe we should be trying to bring the parents into the planning loop. And there was just crickets. Like no one, I would have liked a hostile sort of a look, but it really was, this was completely unheard of. Like what parents are going to help me, do planning. And they're like, how's a parent ever going to be able to understand universal design? Like that idea of universal design, or, like UDL, like you throw the acronyms at them and it's going to go over their head. I'm like, well, why don't we spend time building that connection so that when we're including parents and other stakeholders in the conversation, we got flow. But I hear you. Like, I would be curious as to how would you then engage the parents in that conversation? Because the question is about getting the extension here is what are the conversations that you folks would like to see happen more often? So how do you see that? Bringing that to the parents and saying, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna de-stream next year, and then you can wait or you can keep talking. How would you do that? How would you bring the parents to that convo?
That's a tough question.
Come on, teachers. Come on. This ain't a staff meeting, but interesting though, because there's some power in that.
Oh yeah, well, I think that there is a lot of power in that, and I feel like, I guess information, like providing parents with information, and not just because like we assume that as teachers, everybody else knows the lingo that we're using, like UDL or de-streaming. We assume that everybody outside, so parents or other stakeholders, they understand what that means, right? And most of the times they don't. So actually informing parents and actually giving them support and advice on these topics and like de-streaming or other things, and having them be being open to questions and being open to what they have to say as well, and kind of working together. I feel like those kind of things can be successful, but you really have to have a collaborative learning environment. So like you said, having all the stakeholders involved in what you want to actually go forth with.
Mm-hmm. I love that big word, the dropping of the collaborative learning environment, because again, sitting at that staff meeting and somehow suggesting that a parent could be a part of that. I dare you three to test drive that at your next staff meeting, just to see, find your trustworthy, critical friend and say, yeah, what would it, do you include the parents? And you know what, there's an interesting element to this, because in your TPA, so your teacher's appraisal, one of the look fors in your TPA, so when you're evaluated, is how you integrate feedback from parents into your lesson design and your classroom experience. Mm-hmm. So so just dropping a little knowledge on you. You're like, okay, thank you.
Nobody's ever told me that. Okay, but I have a question.
There's another thing that they didn't tell us at faculty. Go ahead, jump in.
Well, so sorry, as a teacher candidate, or when you're being evaluated as an
once you got
teacher?
Your job. So when you
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was thinking as a teacher candidate, because like, how am I going to get feedback from parents, which is another whole fish to fry that we could talk about. How teacher candidates and connecting with the parents is a whole nother universe, because it's like, because they're not the actual teacher, do we communicate with parents? Do we make those phone calls? That's stepping out of a big, huge comfort zone. And I recently read an article by the EdCan network, and I shared it. It was in French, but it was actually a research based on how teacher candidates going into a classroom as a qualified teacher were not prepared to deal and communicate and collaborate with the parents, because it's something that isn't as focused on in our formation, in our teachers college. And I totally agree.
And like I said, ultimately it's going to be a conversation that you will step into when you are part of your, whether it's part of your induction program as a full-time contractual teacher, or, thereafter in your every 4 year in your rotational TPA, there's going to be one of those look fors, as in how are you, in what ways and why are you integrating parent feedback, parent interaction. It is the collaborative learning spaces without calling the parent a collaborative partner. But I would say that if you spend time nurturing that, you're going to have some really cool stuff to include in that, because that's generally part of the Q&A when you're sitting with the administrator. Yeah, that's one of the things they'll ask you, because it might not always be directly obvious when they're looking at your paperwork. So
there we go. Another thing we have to worry about when we're qualified teachers. Just to add it to the list.
Adding another one to that T-shirt at the front, the back, the arms is all filled up, right? The stuff that wasn't told at faculty. Sarah, is that the sort of that challenging conversation, the baked in? What do you want to throw down on that?
See, I will admit it, this acronym UDL, maybe it's because I'm in the French faculty, I'll blame it on that, but I had never heard of this acronym before. And like I said on the little chat here on the side, like I am on the inside. So I do know what you guys are talking about, but I was thinking more about that whole assessment piece that you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, Chris. So I love the fact that, our province is looking at modernizing our report cards, and that whole assessment piece is hopefully going to be looking a little different. And I love that, on Voice Ed Radio, they had some episodes on a learning province, the public engagement on education assessment in Ontario. So they're really looking for feedback and looking to use those more of those transferable skills in the report cards and in assessment. And we're looking at more critical thinking and communication and, innovation and creativity. So that's what I believe is baked in, and what I like to see change, and what I like to see those gaps. I feel like it's slowly breaking, and we are starting to have those conversations. So I think it's really uplifting.
That's cool. I would agree. And it's, I think for you three, you're going to see more. It's going to be profound for me with the time that I have left in my career. I'm going to see these changes as well. I think it's also going to be, it's going to, completely stoke me to see that those changes have finally, I have enough of the things that I've observed that I like it when I'm starting to see finally they're kind of doing this. Like I have stuff on that list. It takes a little while to be in. I'll say it's about a decade to where you have certain things that you want to get those changes rolling, and then it happens. You're like, finally, you can sort of ease into it. So I'm starting to get some of those things on the list of finally. I think for you folks, you're going to get beyond if you take my word for it, that it's a finally, you're going to be able to put the wheels on it and really drive it and see where it goes next. Because that's where you get the real kind of cool. We can shift mindset right now. If we just hang on to assessment for a second, we can take shift mindset and say, okay, we're getting a little bit more comfortable with a feedback model. We don't have to go right to a mark right away. Maybe we have to declare somewhere in the end, but we're going to have a process where it's primarily feedback until the very end. That's an exciting change, but it's also something that is already existing in other jurisdictions. So it's kind of like we're getting on board with what in general we're seeing as the next shift in education. What you do with it next is what becomes the really exciting thing. And I truly believe that it's going to be a part of your generation of teachers coming through that's going to take it in the direction that it starts to make more sense for each of our jurisdictions or school boards that we're in. So I'm thrilled for you folks on that for sure.
Yeah, and I hope that faculties of ed also change the way that they're teaching us, right? So if these report cards and all of this assessment piece is changing, I think it would be important for the faculties of education to kind of look at what they're teaching future teachers and reassess and restructure some of that.
I totally agree. Mm-hmm. Would you folks believe that we made it to the end of the reunion episode? Look at the time. That's awesome. You know what? I think I have to do it. Let's see. Oh, wait, that's the end, isn't it? Wait, you're supposed to put that on the front end. Maybe it's this one. This is the one that I put on. We can all get mindful for a moment. This is our calming space. Okay, let's before we go back to the reality, all of our realities, whether calm or stormy, throw down where you would like to be found. And just quickly, like a quickly thing, if you got a thing like you're kind of jazzed about this, you're not quite sure what direction it's going to go. It's kind of giving you a little bit of fear, a little bit of excitement. If you got like a project or something, or just a mention you want to put in. So where you want to be found, and if you got something coming down the pipe that's kind of cool.
Oh, okay, I'll go. So
I'm already starting to consider what sort of like if I should, what music I'll put in those little moments. Like, no problem at all. Who's in?
Okay, so this is Sarah. You can find me on Twitter at Sarah, SARAH, Lalonde, LALONDEE. I'm always on Twitter. You can check out my website, sarahannlalone.com, my podcast, Que Sera Sera. And I will actually be having my 1-year anniversary coming up in February. So that's kind of a really cool project that I'm going to be undertaking in the next month. So definitely looking forward to that.
Sounds good. Elif, what you got?
Okay, so my Twitter handle is Miss_Kaynak, KAYNAK. And currently I have a 6-week teaching block coming up. So I'm kind of nervous, but also excited about that. So I'm working on that. So hopefully it'll go really well.
It's fantastic. Diana, wrap it up, my friend.
You guys can find me at Miss Danciu, MSDANCIU. That's my Twitter handle. And right now I'm just doing some supply teaching with Peel District School Board. But Friday, I have an interview with York Region District School Board, my home region, and I'm very nervous for that. So just wish me luck. Send out positive vibes for me.
Sending you good vibes.
Diana,
yeah.
Good luck. That is phenomenal. Good for you.
Thank you.
That is awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you for jumping in and jumping on this. I really appreciate it. It's one of those weird, I'm like I said, I'm happy that in this case, the plan came together, that somehow the little suggestion to reach back out and we could make it happen. And it was a pleasure to reconnect with you in this frame. And I really do. I wish you all the best of luck. And I'm thrilled for what each of you is bringing, but also the ideas that you're trying to develop. I think it's fantastic. And again, I wish you the best of luck in your next steps in your education career.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Chris.
so much for having us.
You're all very welcome. So have a fantastic evening, and I'm sure we will connect online in the Twitter halls very soon, okay?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to Chasing Squirrels podcast. You can find other episodes on iTunes and on Podbean. If you ever want to connect with me, you can reach me on Twitter @ChrisJClough, or you can reach out to me, chrisjclough@gmail.com.